I'm Dr. Erica Bove, and welcome to the Love and Science podcast. I'm your host, and also the founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. I'm so excited you're here today. With over a decade of experience helping thousands of women just like you, I empower professional women to build their families with confidence and compassion. Let's dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. I am just so excited to have my beautiful friend, Dr. Kirin Palmer, on the podcast today. She is a friend, she's a colleague, she is an amazing integrative pediatrician. And today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about optimizing the pre-parenting state, and then we're going to shift into talking about new parenthood, which I firmly believe every single person on this pathway deserves to be a parent. And so this will be relevant. And then also holding joy and grief at the same time. So by way of introduction, Dr. Kirin Palmer is the CEO and founder of Pure Joy Pediatrics in Portland, Oregon, where she takes an integrative approach to pediatrics. We love integrative medicine. We know that the outcomes are better. And she helps parents help their children thrive. She really integrates families in her practice. And so welcome, Dr. Kirin. It is so, so wonderful to have you today.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here and to be of service, just to answer questions and to help parents or pre-parents out there.
Yes, amazing. So, many of my listeners have never had a child before, and many are on the pathway, and that is the hope, that is the goal. Some of my listeners have had a baby before, but they're having a hard time building their families. And so that's the group that we have. What have you learned, rooted in your own experience of what it is to want to be a parent, and how can we use this very precious time? Like, obviously we wanted to be pregnant a long time ago, but how can we use the time that we have to optimize our emotions, our bodies, our minds for the little one who's meant to be ours?
Oh my goodness, that is such a great question. And I think there's probably many answers to it all at once, but because I was in that situation, I didn't know if I was going to have a child, and I really, really wanted, to be a mom. I think there's like this yearning. And sometimes when you're not sure that it's going to happen, you're sort of in this mindset of scarcity and a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety. You may want to be a parent and not have a partner. You may, want to be a parent and be in a working situation where, we all know, like, we work short-staffed a lot. We take call, we work overnights, and all of those things make our bodies and make us emotionally very friable. And it's certainly not the best case scenario for trying to be pregnant. And so I think the first thing is, like, when we talk about, I would just call it the pre-parenting situation. So even before conceiving, learning how to sort of let go of the things that really kind of weigh you down. Worry is, like, I would say that it's very much a part of being a physician, right? Like, we're trained to worry about our patients. And I think when you are taking call, for instance, and you fix somebody, you put a Band-Aid on it, you started meds, you put them on, pressors or whatever your specialty is. When you're on call, like, you kind of go to sleep, but you sleep with one eye open because you're worried. And so our brain and our bodies get really used to worrying. And, if you're sort of preoccupied with trying to conceive, or trying to find a partner with whom to conceive, or trying to figure out, like, the resources to conceive if you're going to be a solo parent, that adds to it as well. And what I see in my practice is that once parents go from being pre-parents to actually being parents, that worry just kind of follows. It happened to me. I was worried about, having the right partner. And then I was worried about getting pregnant. And then I was worried about getting sick. Then I was worried about losing the baby. Then I was worried about, how I was going to deliver. And then I was working in urgent care. So then I was worried once the baby had arrived, I was then worried about getting him sick. And I do talk to parents on the other side of that threshold of delivering your baby, that pregnancy itself, I think, really kind of primes us to worry. And then we bring it into our parenting as well. And when we worry, we're not really sometimes we're not really focused on the present, like moment of joy that's in front of us. We're worried about
Hmm.
what's going to happen. And sometimes you miss that moment of joy. So I think the first thing is recognizing that our whole existence as physicians or high achieving professionals, the pre-parenting and even the post, the after post delivery, the parenting part of it, it's all fraught with opportunity to worry. And
Hmm.
that won't go away unless you start to figure out how to let it go. Um, I would say for me, like probably the best way to let go of worry, well, one is to recognize it's there, but two, to actually start practicing more self-care, which I think as a physician, I completely like threw out the window. I mean, like we have this bravado of like, I don't have to pee, I don't have to brush my hair, all I need is a cup of coffee, and I'm like good to go. And like, and so yeah, right. So like our professions kind of help us sort of throw the self-care out the window. But I think and you're the expert in helping people get pregnant, but I think when you're in the pre-parenting stage, it's important to take care of yourself because your emotional and physical state are very much a part of like, increasing the possibilities of actually conceiving and having a healthy pregnancy. Um,
Yeah.
so that was a lot, but
No, no. So let's talk about it because I think of self-care as kind of an act of defiance in our current culture. And, like the bag that I bring in or like the shirt that I wear, my socks, I have a pendant for like really offensive socks. And so like I might be wearing my scrubs, but like high up underneath the scrubs is something that like I need to hear that day just to remind myself to be bold in the face of this, and being counterculture really. And so countercultural. And so, like, for me, maybe it's like peeing in between patients, even though I know I'm like already 5 minutes behind, but I know that that next patient's going to get more of me if I can like meet my bodily needs. Maybe it's I give my trainee permission to do something with their bodily functions when they don't know that that's possible. And then it's like helping the next generation to learn. Like, I sent my fellow home like 2 weeks ago because he was very sick. And I was like, you don't need to work, you need to rest, and we got this. And like those sorts of things, helping other people do that, but then also needing to do it myself, like making sure that I sleep as much as possible. And like maybe that research talk is gonna not quite have as many references in it, but like that just has to be. I cut myself off at a certain time now. Like I think sometimes we think that we need like a whole week away for self-care, or we need like, like even a weekend or like a whole spa day or whatever it is. But there's these small acts of self-care that we can work in during the day that really make so much of a difference. What have you found, Kirin, for your self-care, like things that actually work that are doable?
well, so this is probably a little bit more if you have small children, it probably wouldn't work, especially because I'm a single parent. But I like to work out in the morning, and so I'm usually up at like 4:45, 5 o'clock, and I work out. And so that's really my form of self-care right now, because I have a 14-year-old and he's going to sleep in anyway. He doesn't really know that I'm gone. And then, I still have to wake him up when I come home. Earlier, when he was younger, during the pandemic, when the gyms were closed, I would get up and walk the dog just in front of my house and just kind of go back and forth. So you don't really have to do anything dramatic. You don't have to join a gym, but just like getting out and going for a walk with the dog, and kind of paying attention. I actually learned this from our mutual friend Rashmi Shram. Like you can just walk the dog, and that can be an exercise of mindfulness and meditation. And so it can look different depending on what's going on in your life. It could even just start with like brushing your hair, or like some mornings when it was really, really hard. And we'll get into a little bit more about, finding joy through grief. Sometimes it was just being grateful for a cup of coffee, or being grateful to talk to one of my parents on the phone, or and so those like little small acts of kindness, to yourself can happen, at any point during the day. I actually was thinking this morning when I was working out that I think I'll bring my jump rope, and I'm going to clear out the chair in my office here, and maybe even set out like a yoga mat so I can stretch, between patients or at lunch. And then if it's nice and sunny, right now it's not, it's rainy and gray out here. But take the jump rope out and just like do a couple of like jump ropes. So I think, integrating the person that we are outside of medicine with
Mm.
what we're doing during the day, is just, I love that, how you said it. It's like an act of defiance.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I think you and I both learned this maybe on the later side of things. And I think you said that you see that people carry their anxiousness into their new parenting and their children. And I'd love to talk about that too. What what do you think we can do like as like people who are preparing to be pregnant or pregnant people specifically, in terms of like shedding that worry? Hello, my loves. I am so excited to share this news with you. If you are a female physician navigating the fertility journey and you want a structured, evidence based plan, I have created a free resource for you. It's called the Physician Fertility Roadmap. I have created a guide to help you optimize your chances of pregnancy and a successful outcome over the next 6 to 12 months. Check out the link in the show notes. Love you. Bye.
I think it comes out of like a scarcity mindset, right? Like it's not going to happen for me. It's not happening according to plan. It's not happening with the person that I thought it would be with, or maybe I'm doing this on my own and I don't know what's going to happen on the other side. Like, some people decide to be parents without a spouse or a partner, but they have like, a very supportive family, but you still don't know what's going to happen on the other side of it. I would say as a pediatrician, I've seen many parents go through, different forms of infertility, and they come out on the other side. And like, I mean, I think I believe as you do that, parents who want to be parents, people who want to be parents really should be parents. And I think if we worry too much about it not happening, that can actually impede like your own emotional health, which when you do get pregnant is going to make it a little harder to be present with this baby that you have on the other side. The
Yeah.
the other thing in functional medicine and integrative medicine that we understand, and I'm seeing this more and more because I now know to ask the questions, and I don't really get to be part of the pregnancy journey. I get to be part of the post-pregnancy journey. And I wish that we could speak to, women who are trying to get pregnant before they deliver, that that our babies feel our stress. They do. Like, hormones go across the placenta. And when we are stressed and anxious while we're pregnant, our babies are feeling it too. So
Hmm.
oftentimes I will see, mothers who are extremely anxious when they have their babies. They're anxious with their babies. The babies are anxious too. And I say this from personal experience because I have one. I had a very healthy, like physically healthy pregnancy, but emotionally very anxious pregnancy. And
Hmm.
I didn't know then what I know now. So I'm actually speaking to me like
Hmm.
or 15 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
just rest in the knowledge that the best case scenario for getting pregnant is for you to be as calm and let go of the anxiety that you're feeling about it not happening, and just say if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. I
Yeah, or there's a pathway to parenthood that's meant to be mine. And I think you're right. So number one, I heard you say the scarcity mindset, and we get so rooted in, oh my gosh, I only have two embryos frozen, or oh my gosh, like what if it like we just plan 5 million steps out, and that hypervigilance is not good for our fertility. It's not. So that's the first thing is how to get into an abundance mindset. And sometimes we need a guide. I mean, I think you and I both have drank
yeah.
the coaching Kool-Aid. And sometimes we do need a guide. So that's the first thing is how to say, okay, there was a time when I didn't know I was going to be a doctor, right? I was like I called myself a young hopeful, right? Like I did all the things and I studied for the MCAT. I took it twice and I wanted so much to be a doctor, but I didn't know if it was going to happen. And for most of us, we didn't know. We had to like have the belief that there was a possibility it was going to happen. We did the things, and then here we are on the other side. And so I think just leaning on previous experiences of uncertainty and like saying, you know what, I didn't know if it was going to work out and it did, and here I am, so I'm going to do the things with that hope, understanding that if at some point I need to pivot, then there will be a pathway. And then the other thing is, we are not taught how to feel our feelings, and I think you and I have both learned this over time, but that's part of optimizing the pre-pregnancy state really is to say, okay, I am feeling anxious. How can I process that anxiety? Or maybe it's a positive pregnancy test and people are feeling, really nervous that the other shoe's going to drop. How do I manage that? Like all those different things. And so learning as a discipline, feeling feelings, processing them. It literally takes 90 seconds to process an emotion. That discipline will help us during pregnancy, and it will also help us as new parents. And it's always the question, right? Nature versus nurture with this, like, but I think there's something to birth order, right? They say, okay, for people who have more than one child, why is like the first child a certain way and why is the second? It's probably because the parents learn what's important and what's not important and can, well, every kid is different, of course, but I'm sure you see this, especially in your families who have gone through infertility treatment. Can you say a little bit about, we know increased rates of postpartum anxiety, increased rates of postpartum depression, what you notice in those people and what tools you have to help them?
It's it's really fascinating, actually. So, what I see on the pediatric side of things, if I have a family who's had a baby through a surrogate, right? So they had an infertility journey and were not able to, conceive biologically, or even like sustain a pregnancy through in vitro
Mhm.
IUI. Families that have babies born through surrogacy or even their own like, IUI or IVF treatments. um, it's so fascinating to me. Like, there's a lot of conversations about vaccines right now, but families who've gone through infertility, they're like, do it all, protect this baby, right?
Hmm.
I think it comes out of, and you probably see this, just like the journey of like, trying to, trying to force those embryos, trying to get those eggs out, right? Like, we put so much into this little baby. We need to protect this baby from everything. And I would say that most families I see on the other side of it, like besides like being like absolutely gung-ho about making sure the baby's protected for every possible infirmity that we can, they're so grateful for their children. They
Yes.
are. It's such a beautiful thing. It's just like, I mean, I think that every birth is a miracle, and I don't attend deliveries anymore, but I just feel like as a pediatrician, when that baby arrives, it's like the sky opens up, the heavens open up, and this magical gift happens. There is like, I feel like there's like this pause in the room. As long as mom's okay and baby's okay, there's like a pause in the room, and everybody is just like, ah, like everybody's like breathing, and just soaking in this baby. So that's what I see is like, one, they're very interested in making sure their children are healthy, and keeping them from feeling sick, and they're grateful for the children that they have. I think that sometimes families that have been through, infertility on the other side of it they're very nervous though about keeping their children healthy. And so I might see them more frequently. Oftentimes they need a lot more support. And I think it maybe comes out of this idea too of like, I was thinking as you were speaking, that when it's your first time going through a pregnancy or as parenting, as a parent, when you're going through infertility, you probably get to a point where you don't really trust your body, right?
Mm.
And I think this element of like self-trust is so important. Like, and maybe again, like that comes out of the scarcity mindset of like, I don't know if I can get pregnant. I don't know if I'm going to find the right partner. I don't know if I'm going to find the right, sperm donor or egg donor, what have you. I don't know if the delivery is going to go the way I want it to. I don't even know how I'm going to be as a parent. I want to breastfeed. I don't know that that's going to happen. And so there's all these like what ifs about what your body's going to do, what it's capable of doing, because it's never done it before. Um,
Hmm.
and and that's just a really hard way to come into the whole parenting situation. Because on the other side of your delivery, your hormones are going to drop and you're going to feel like kind of a hormonal, emotional sort of bundle of nerves. And if you've come through a pregnancy anxious, you're going to be extremely anxious on the other side. But it's okay. Like, no judgment here, because I've experienced that myself and I see lots of families that do. But it does make sense then to think about who your team is on the other side of delivery and making sure that the team that you have, your physician, your baby's physician, that they've got you.
Yes.
So don't
Yes. And yes, go ahead, Dr. Karen. Go ahead.
So don't leave that up to chance. I
Yes.
think a lot of times families who are expecting are just kind of planning for the delivery. They want the best OB, they want the best REI, and they sometimes forget that they need to find a pediatrician on the other side of that delivery that's going to help support them and answer their questions. I think it's so important, but I oftentimes see families forget that part.
If you're listening right now and finding yourself nodding along, this is usually the moment people realize that they want support that's specific to them. In addition to this podcast, I offer one-on-one fertility consults where we look at your full picture with both strategy and compassion. You can learn more in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the conversation. I think that's so beautiful. And thank you so much for reminding us. I mean, I do think that again, I'll say it again, there's more postpartum anxiety and more postpartum depression among women who have gone through the fertility journey. And, the worries continue. I mean, as much as we do the emotional regulation, as much, there's so many things. And I think, when I look at who I choose for my care team, like my doctors, it's people who walk the walk, right? It's like people who understand the self-trust. A lot of these questions that we ask, I mean, there's sometimes not clear answer. Like, me perimenopause right now. Do I start the hormones? Do I not? I mean, I do hormones for a living, but I want somebody who I know trusts their own body and like knows limitations and can really like have that intuitive sense of like how to help people. And so I think it's so beautiful what you're doing in your practice. Can you say a little bit about integrative pediatrics and what that is? Because I think before you, I thought about, functional medicine for adults and integrative practice, but I hadn't really thought of it as applying to children. So can you say a little bit about that?
Well, so yes. So I'm a general pediatrician. I'm board certified. I'm a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Actually, I'm a fellow. Did conventional pediatric residency, and I very much believe in what we promote. So, regular wellness checks, vaccines, medication if you need it. If you're asthmatic, you need it. If you have an ear infection, we treat it. If you have a pneumonia, we treat it. Um, but what I found in the almost 20 years of pediatrics is that conventional medicine, like there are ailments that children have that conventional medicine can treat up to here. But then, like beyond that, we just kind of go, well, um, just, if you have a constipated child, just live on Miralax for the rest of your life. It's okay, it's safe, right? And I started to think, gosh, like when did humans get to this point where like we have to take vitamins, we have to be on iron supplements? I have teens and younger getting iron infusions because they can't maintain their own iron levels and they're chronically anemic and they're chronically constipated. And I kept thinking, this just doesn't feel sustainable. Like when did we as a human race get to this? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so my interest in functional medicine, I think, came out of, a lot of things. I lived overseas in South America. There are, there they drink teas and tisanes and things like that have medicinal properties. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. I'm also Hawaiian and we have a lot of medicinal herbs that, we kind of grew up with as well, knowing that, Hawaiians use these things for different ailments. And then when actually a friend of mine nudged me and she says, hey, let's do this together. And I was like, yeah, what is functional medicine? And I really thought it was like the territory for naturopaths, but not for medical doctors. And I found actually that there was a very large organization in Seattle, in fact, where many of the practitioners are medical doctors. And then I also found an integrative pediatrician who's a medical doctor who is a Stanford fellowship trained. And I was like, oh, medical doctors are starting to do this. And really, it sounds so fancy, but really what we do is we get down to the root cause of why you have the symptoms that you're having.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in conventional pediatrics, we say, yes, your child is constipated, have Miralax, drink more water, take more fiber, and we'll see you next year. In functional medicine, we say, okay, yes, let's treat the constipation, but why is it happening? Is your child very selective about what they eat? 9 times out of 10 they are. Well, why are they selective about what they're eating? What's going on inside of their gut? So it's very like gut focused, getting to the root cause of why you're experiencing this symptom rather than just kind of discharging you on Miralax for the rest of your life. And so I find it extremely rewarding. I have figured out how to convince even like 3-year-olds to get their blood drawn because we find all sorts of things when we do that. And like lots of surprises, like, kids with celiac disease who have no symptoms and they're kind of um,
Mm,
I would say almost pre-celiac, but they've got positive antibodies and their TTGs are normal. Um, I've had children that I never would have suspected were pre-diabetic,
mm,
they have normal BMIs, but so just lots of things that related to the nourishment we put into our bodies or the nourishment we give our children, and finding out that maybe they're not feeling their bodies the way they should. So I honestly think the bottom line with functional medicine and integrating it into pediatrics is just kind of getting back to the way we ate as hunter-gatherers, like whole food.
yeah.
I think of fermented foods as like an added food group. But the hard part is like when your child's eating chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, like how do you get them to eat, a salad and vegetables
Hmm.
and all the things. So that's my world. I help parents get to that. So
Right. So they don't have to be on pills and vitamins and all these things forever and ever and ever. And I mean, there's so many things. I mean, like I have a kid with psoriasis, which is like stress mediated. And it's like, okay, well, you can take these drops and these creams and everything like that. Or maybe we can start to understand the stress and the flares and all those things. And I think we don't always, kids are like little people, right? We don't always like think about them, but they are people. And a lot of the attention I think that we spend doing integrative health for adults, I think really we need to be spending, towards children and like, you know, yeah. Go ahead. What were we gonna say?
well, so one of the things that occurred to me, because I'm always kind of evolving and figuring out like how do I do this better. But one of the things that I heard from some of our colleagues was, oh my goodness, in my practice with adult patients, we can reverse diabetes, we can reverse hypertension, we can reverse obesity. And how are we doing it? Sometimes it's with medication, but a lot of it
Mm.
is lifestyle changes. And so then I thought, wait a second. If we can reverse it in adulthood, then we really need to be doing a better job in pediatrics of like preventing that progression, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're so smart.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I love what you do. I mean, if you don't follow Dr. Kirin already on Instagram, we'll put all of our stuff in the show notes, but it's really creative and really like, I wish I lived closer. I really do, because I think you're doing it right. And I would be so excited to have you in my world as a pediatrician. So I will
we
just say that.
we're in each other's world as friends and
That's
colleagues.
right. That's right. And colleagues. Okay, so I want to shift a little bit because you, over the last couple of years, have had a really, really hard couple of years with your father getting sick and ultimately dying. And when we've had conversations about this offline, I've been so moved at how you have grieved his loss, and also even before that, like how you readjusted your life when you knew that his situation was terminal to be able to spend as much time with him as possible in the middle of running this busy pediatric practice, in the middle of being a single parent. So I
Right.
was wondering, because so many of our listeners are dealing with really, really hard times in their life right now. Like this infertility perhaps is like the first truly hard thing that has happened and like life altering, devastating, horrible thing that has happened. And so I think, when I was an intern, my chief said to me, as long as you have your perspective and your priorities in line, like everything else is going to be okay. And that's what I think you did over the last few years. And so could you please share a little bit about your journey being a daughter to your father, who I know you adored, and the choices you made? And, we can talk a little bit about joy and grief at the same time, but to set the stage, give us some context if you don't mind sharing the story.
Oh, okay. So I might get a little teary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got my Kleenex here. Do you have your Kleenex?
I'm a total daddy's girl, and I'm the oldest of 8. My parents split up when I was 11, and they both remarried, but I was the oldest. And um, yeah, and my dad was always like just a prime example of being like the best like emotional and physical state that he could be in at whatever age he was in. He was just so much fun, and he had this like sense of adventure, and he was sharp, sharp, sharp. And I remember thinking to myself like, I really hope dad lives into his 90s. That was his goal. He wanted to live. His dad passed away at 85, and so his goal was to live till at least 92. And he really thought that he could make it. And then the pandemic hit, And actually, I mean, I think if one thing I would say is perspective is everything. So sometimes I think that as a physician, we think that we're one trick ponies, that all we can do is like physician. And regardless of your specialty, this gift that we have of being physicians, it's so powerful. Like not only does it help our patients, but it has the potential to help our families too. To the point where like I almost think that every family needs either a physician or a nurse to advocate for, whoever it is that needs it. And so in 2020, he was diagnosed with like a rare form of, it's a pre-leukemic state, myelodysplastic syndrome. And he and I kind of got to the conclusion together because my dad was an accountant and engineer, and he literally like he mapped out and graphed his CBCs over a period of 6 years. And it was interesting. He says, Kirin, I kind of see my bone marrow is just kind of slowing down. It literally is like just a straight line. He goes, and this is not sustainable. And so, he asked me what you should do. And I said, I think you need a really good hematologist. And long story short, he was diagnosed in March of 2020 and started chemotherapy at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think the timing, like on the one hand, you could think the timing was the worst it could possibly be, but I think the timing was the best it could possibly be because um, it forced me to make a decision. And what I decided was I live in Portland, Oregon, and dad lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm a single parent. And at the time in Oregon, I wasn't too happy with it. You had to quarantine every time you traveled. And I was like, you know what? Like this thing has an overall survival rate of 3 months. We're just like I learned from dad. We're just gonna go for it. We're just gonna do it and we're gonna deal with the consequences, whatever they may be. And so my son and I started to travel to visit dad from March until June. I think we traveled like twice. The airports were completely like silent. There were no people, really. The airplanes were empty. It was really surreal. Um, and so we visited him, and then he went through chemo, and then he had a stem cell transplant, which made him really sick. And at the time, it was interesting because Oregon was so shut down and Florida was not, that I could actually see like two different existences and figured out a way to reconcile them. Anyway, I'm making this
Mm,
story very long, sorry. Um,
okay.
but yeah, so I just decided like at the beginning, like we're just gonna go for it. This is how my dad lived his life. Like if you live your life without taking measured risks, it's much worse to like live with regret than to take a risk that you've kind of factored in all the things and you've determined like, yeah, it's risky, but it's worth it. And so that's what we did. In 2022, I lost my job. I was part of a small group practice, and through a difference of opinion, found myself having to pivot. Um, and it was, I looked at all of the choices. I had seen some of the large hospitals furlough or fire their physicians and thought, I don't want to work there. Um, I didn't want to work in urgent care because, again, like I'm a single parent, I didn't want to leave my son alone at night or on the weekends. And so I decided that I would start a practice. And my dad was very much a part of like, figuring out the financials and super, super encouraging. Even before I left my last job, I actually put a photo of my dad and I up on my computer. And I thought, every time I looked at it, I thought, when he passes, how am I going to feel about this?
Mm,
I'm so glad that I had it up because it's like my dad's with me, and like I take him into the patient rooms with me because it's a picture of me and my dad on my wallpaper. And so I think just from the very beginning, the pandemic forced us to think about what was important and how to hold on to this very important relationship, to be there for my dad, to advocate for him. I mean, it just yeah, I think it's just about like prioritizing and not being afraid of taking those risks for the things that are,
gosh.
yeah.
So you would take like a red eye, right? You would work Monday through Thursday. Let's like spell this out for our
Yes.
listeners.
So when I started my practice, I decided that I would work half days on Mondays. So I start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm here all day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Fridays we work till midday. And so it made it really easy. I figured out this sort of cadence of like if I could take off on a Friday and we would fly, a red eye Thursday, show up on Friday, be kind of tired on Friday, but be there all day Saturday, Sunday, and then fly back on Monday. And I would take my son with me. So really, I only needed like 5 days, more or less. Sometimes I would cancel a day of clinic. And at the beginning, I mean, this is like letting go of the things you're afraid of and like taking, measured risks. I didn't have that many patients. So it wasn't like if I took off a Monday completely or maybe even a Tuesday, I didn't really have anybody beating down my door. And
Right.
I set up my team so that there was at least somebody answering the phones. And I've done televisits from Florida before, you know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
I can, so it was actually perfect that I hatched my own practice because it allowed me to have some flexibility and to think creatively about how to solve problems for dad and how to solve problems for my patients. But yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
there were times where I sat in his dining room taking televisits while he was like sitting there watching TV, and it just was nice to be in the same
Hmm.
space together. Um, yeah, we
And how long did you exist like that? How long did you do that until he ultimately passed?
about 3 years. 3 years.
It's amazing.
I mean, I've even done televisits from I was never in the ICU with him because if he was in the ICU, well, we were in step down together. We were in the ICU together. Yeah, I've done televisits from the ICU as well. Um, and the beautiful thing is like the same energy and passion that I have for advocating for my patients. I very easily was able to turn and like use to advocate for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did it. Still am not sure like how we did it. I do have coaches in my life, and so I think that that was also really helpful to like give me some perspective. Yeah, I think I had one coach actually say to me, she's like, I think sometimes you're buffering. You whenever you have like a big project in your practice, sometimes you buffer just saying, well, I'm thinking about dad. And so there's this nice balance between like managing the projects in the practice and then also being present with my dad. And then also too, like the finances behind it too, right? Like it's very easy to think like, am I going to have because I'm in solo practice. I'm a general pediatrician. Like I don't do procedures. And so there's also that part of it too. If I don't work and see patients, then like who's going to pay the bills and, and all of the money that goes into flying back and forth. But yeah, it was a delicate balance, but we did it. And I think too, like because he had this rare diagnosis with a 3-month overall survival rate, it was very easy to say, well, I would much rather spend the time and the money to see him as much as I can and to have my son see him as
Mhm.
often as he can. Because I think I would regret it if I just said, well, I don't think I can cancel a day of patients. I don't think I can afford, an airplane ticket. So yeah, I kind of think of it like throwing yourself out of an airplane and going skydiving. You're just like, we're making a decision, we're just gonna do it. And
That's right.
yeah, pull the chute when you need to. And so, to be honest, like when he passed in June of last year, I wasn't able to take time off because, my practice really needed me to be at the helm. And I have to say that I think probably as a CEO, I was not as present as I needed to be. But I was also grateful to like just kind of come back and start seeing patients again. Um, because I think it was just easier to go back to the routine. And that was like a sort of buffering too. Like I much preferred seeing babies and 3-year-olds rather than sitting at home just grieving. I think I'm grieving in pieces.
Hmm.
Still grieving.
Hmm.
I don't know when I'll stop grieving, but every once in a while I'll hear something that reminds me of him. He taught me so much. I don't know how one person could teach me so much, but I'll hear a song or I'll see something and it reminds me of him and I'm grieving a little bit. So I think grief is like this roller coaster.
Hmm.
There are moments where you are really kind of missing this person. And then there's moments of joy, like I I enjoy walking my dog and seeing him be, silly. I enjoy watching the cherry blossoms as they're coming out. And it's almost like when you're grieving, if you can reach for just something that's so beautiful and enjoy it for like a split second, or like a sunrise or a sunset.
Mhm.
We have beautiful sunrises and sunsets without horizons here. There's always like evergreen trees in the way. But if you can enjoy those moments, I think it kind of helps you, kind of steals you for like the moments where you really kind of feel like you're grieving. Um, I never feel like I don't feel like grieving is a bottomless pit. I just think there's just moments where I experience it. I thought twice about, he passed in June of last year, and I thought twice about spending the money and the time to go out to, a conference in October with one of our business coaches. And I knew that I needed to go because I just felt like my spirit and my soul
Mhm.
like just needed to be restored. It was, near the ocean in South Carolina in Myrtle Beach. And it was so good for my soul to be there and to connect with you, with other women physicians that I really kind of value and cherish who've helped me through this whole thing. And
Mhm.
that would be like another suggestion is just stay connected. I think sometimes when we're going through a hard time, like it's very easy to kind of involute and not reach out. But I know there's so many other women physician friends of mine that knew what was going on because I was, I'd share. And so I never felt like I was alone and that I didn't have, friends that could back me up. And then when we saw each other in person, it was so nice to just like connect and feel supported and to feel like I was, part of a family, really. And so, some people, I think, when they're grieving the loss of a parent or a spouse, or, in your case, many of your patients might be grieving like a miscarriage, because, that's a form of, and that's a different type of thing that you're grieving, right? Is
Yeah.
the potential life and the dream that you're holding space for. Um, it's it's so much easier if you do it and you're connected with, friends, and feel supported. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful.
No, I think so. And I think, the when we let one emotion in, we let another emotion in, right? And so like that's one thing I learned in residency, which I mean, I've shared this before, like to survive residency, I had this very restricted zone of emotions. And I said, in my integrity, I'm going to take care of my patients and I'm going to protect my junior residents. But like other than that, to survive in New York City as a Vermont girl, it was a very different time. But I realized like I can, keep out the criticism from like the attendings and whatever else, but I also am keeping out the joy. And I think the same thing is true that like when we're grieving infertility, miscarriage, recurrent loss, all the things that, sickness of a parent, death of a parent, if we can allow ourselves to grieve that, if we can do that in community, if we can do that with supports, that also, those channels, that also is when we can open ourselves up to the joy and the connection and the unexpected support. Like, I don't know if you remember, Karen, like I'm sure you do, like that night that we got to sit together at dinner at that conference, the other woman right next to you at the table was talking about the loss of her own father. And like that was so healing. And we have to share our stories. I mean, we have to. And there's so much healing in the telling. And, my own father is still alive. There will be a day when he's not. And, leaning on you and our other beautiful friends like that just helps me honor my own human experience and just know that like it can be hard, but we're not going to do it alone.
I would say that like a beautiful example of how this is done, is so our mutual friend Rashmi Shram, she lives in
Oh
Jackson,
yeah.
and there were times where I would go to visit my dad and I would say, I need to just like spend 100% of the time with my dad. But the reality of
Yeah.
it was, is like I would go with my son. And when my son and my dad were together, it was like I was like the outsider. They were like tinkering, they were building things. And I was like, these guys aren't going to miss me if I go for a walk on the beach. These guys aren't going to miss me if I go see my friend. And so honestly, like every single time I traveled and my dad was getting medical care in Houston, like I would look up a friend. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like I looked up Tamara Beckford. She and I connected like towards the very end when he was very, very sick. And it was just so healing just to like spend an hour in her presence, just like the joy and the love that she has. And just it meant so much to me that she came and just spent some time with me while we were there. We were there in Houston for like a week. Or I have another friend in Houston. We went out and drank boba tea together and just talked like moms and women. And then in Jacksonville, Rashmi, this was the one that really stood out. I had called her ahead of time and dad was in the ICU. He was really sick. He was really, really sick. And I don't take care of adults. So like it was still amazing. My general medical training and my pediatrics came in, but she says, Kirin, what can I do for you? And I just, like when you have somebody that you love that's so, so sick and you can't predict the outcome, it's hard to even like think straight. And I was like, Rashmi, can you just like come and rescue me from the ICU for just like an hour? And she goes, can I bring you anything? I was like, how about some tea? So she comes to the hospital in Jacksonville. I come out of the ICU. Dad's gonna be okay for like an hour. We get in the car, we drive to the waterfront and just like walked and talked and had some herbal tea. And it was like just so good for my soul. It was so restorative. We did nothing but like connect and have a cup of tea. It took an hour. I went back up.
Mm,
I had been there for like an entire week, but just like that was like an act of like kindness on Rashmi's part. It was an act of kindness on my part to like
hmm.
enjoy the sunshine and a friend's company for an hour. So
That's so beautiful. And
didn't
she was a part too of your ultimate decision to travel to be with him, so you could
oh
be with him at
oh
his
yeah.
his his
Yes.
moments, his final moments. And like that's just so beautiful.
Yeah, and I almost canceled on her. I had put together, and I'll put it out because you're in there too. But I think my soul was searching for answers and was searching to be restored before he passed. And so a month before he passed, I started to put together this the Joy Reset Summit, and I interviewed you, and I interviewed Rashmi also, and she was the last interview that I did, and that was June 11th, and it was 9 in the morning, and my dad was in the ICU again, and she and I talked about like mindfulness, and when we got off the call, she and I just talked as friends, and I said, Dad's real sick, and I'm going to travel tomorrow, and she goes, Kirin, you have been preparing your whole life for this. And she said, if you intuitively feel like you need to go today, then like follow your intuition. And so it was just this beautiful, like very overt nudge, right? Because she knew what was going on. And I was like, you're right. So I got off the call and I was like, please call all my patients and reschedule this afternoon's patients. I'm going to be on the first flight out tonight. And we did a red eye. And oh my goodness, thank goodness I listened to her and myself. And I think that's really where like the self-trust comes in is like I think we all kind of have like this knowing, like this inner knowing, but we can buffer and we can cover it up and we can explain it away. We can rationalize and say, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. But but if you do all that and you ignore this like inner knowing of like it's going to be okay, you know what to do. And I did. And it was all fine. Like none of my patients were upset. My staff wasn't upset. And it got me, 24 hours, 24 very important hours to just help him wind down
Mm,
and for us to all be okay with what was going to happen. And I think the thing I was most, I'm going to say worried about was missing his time of death. I wanted to
hmm.
be there and he wanted me to be there and I made it. And,
Yeah.
and
Good.
because I have really good friends like you, I have really good friends like Rashmi who like helped me kind of get this perspective and to let go and to follow my intuition. So,
Yeah,
and
and I think the same is true in the fertility journey. I mean, sometimes people know they need to do another IVF cycle, even if their partner's not on board, or sometimes people know, like what they know what they want, but they're afraid of it because maybe it inconveniences patients, or maybe it's a little more expensive. But that's one thing I love helping people do is to tap into that inner knowing with this fertility process because it's so important. And we have those whispers, we can shut it down, like you said, but But any bad decision I've made in my life has been when I ignored that whisper of intuition and ignored it. And so now I'm in my 40s, I'm getting better at being like, oh, that voice, okay, I hear you. I'm not gonna and sometimes it's not like an impulsive action. It's like, I'm gonna sit with this. I mean, obviously you needed to go and you knew it was time sensitive, but we need to listen to that voice and we need to develop that muscle of self-trust so that we can lean in and do the things that are most important for us.
Yeah. Well, and it also like leads into that point of like being connected and actually like being connected with friends to the point where like you can make yourself a little vulnerable and share with them. Because if I hadn't done that, Roshni wouldn't have known, right?
Yes. Yes.
Known to nudge me, and you wouldn't have known, t- to talk with me about, how do we find joy through grief? Because we talked about this before
We
too.
talked about it. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and so I have this beautiful the Joy Reset Summit, which is really meant for, and something completely outside of my practice, which is really meant for mostly women going through hard times. And it came out of me needing that that wisdom and
Yeah.
those teachings. And so when he passed, I used every single tool that I learned out of the Joy Reset Summit to come through on the other side. And I still use it. And it's something I need to share it. But it's still something that I use to this day because there's
Yeah.
wisdom in it and you're in there and you're part of it. And I'm so
Well, the
grateful.
timing wasn't right yet, but when the timing is right, you'll release it and then we'll let everybody know. Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. Well, this is such a beautiful and rich conversation. Dr. Kieran, is there anything else you want our listeners to hear about pregnancy planning, about, shedding anxiety, layers of worry, joy and grief? I mean, gosh, there's so much we can take from this conversation.
I would say just know that it's never too late. So even if you were anxious during your pregnancy, don't worry about high cortisol levels on during your pregnancy and the impact on your baby because everything is fixable, right? It's when we think it's either this or that, I kind of live in the and like, yeah, you can be anxious in your pregnancy and it's still going to be okay. Um,
Hmm.
and that's what I'm here for is like to catch parents on the other side of the infertility, the delivery, and to be on their side and say, "Hey, I'm here. I can help you decode what's going on with your baby, and it's okay." Because it's really hard to break a baby. We just really kind of need to support you as a parent, and it's never too late. So, regardless
Yeah.
of
So
how you delivered, regardless of how anxious you might have been or worried or all the things, like we can still fix it. It's gonna be fine.
yeah, yeah. And to have somebody like you who understands, who's walked the walk to support you in those early days and as the kid grows, because there is going to be a kid. If you listen to my podcast, every single person who has a desire in their heart to become a parent will become a parent. And you're in Portland, Oregon. Like I said, if I lived closer, you better believe I'd be knocking down your doors. But Dr. Kieran does it differently and better. I'll just say that. And you need to go look her up and go find her. But also, your social media is really wonderful. So, can you share with people where they can find you on socials?
Yes, so it's my first and last name, Kirin Palmer, MD, on Instagram. The name of my practice is Pure Joy Pediatrics. So we have an Instagram, Pure Joy Pediatrics, and my website is purejoypediatrics.com. And I'm also on Facebook under Kirin Palmer, MD. So just my name, if you search it, you should be able to find me. And yeah, we're doing such fun, rewarding work out here in Portland. So thank you.
Yay, amazing. Thanks, Dr. Karen. I'm so grateful to know you. And to my loves, until the next time, you know how much I love you. Bye.